Discussing the topic of healthcare transformation and developing global cooperation in health, please welcome once again to the stage our moderator for the session, Ms. Amelia Yahya.
Well, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm back and I'm so happy to be here to be your moderator for the 5th session, and today we're going to be talking about an array of topics surrounding healthcare transformation as well as developing the cooperation in health. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce myself again. So my name is Amelia Yahya and I was a news anchor and producer for CNN Indonesia, and now I'm based in Singapore. So here we go. To talk about healthcare, which is indeed the most intriguing and the most exciting subject, especially right now, I would like to maybe once again mention how just 2 years ago the WHO has declared the COVID-19 as a pandemic, and since then 6 million staggering lives were lost due to the disease, and our daily life has changed in countless of ways. And some countries, though, have regained a degree of normality. Others are still trying to survive. And 2 years now, let us reflect on the things that we have learned, on what we should have done, on what we shouldn't have done. And the healthcare system and services are indeed the most pivotal at this point. Ladies and gentlemen, in addressing an array of issues, multiple stakeholders such as the government and international institutions and organizations, as well as public sectors, private investments, as well as us being individuals, we have fortunately come together and collaborated in the fight to achieve important success. And though we have achieved and recovery is right here with us, the process was not easy. And of course, it was far from perfect, but we did it. Recovery is right here. And ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia, being the 4th most populous country in the world, we're also the largest island nation, which in healthcare, that spells trouble, as distribution and logistics was not the easiest for all of us. And ladies and gentlemen, so today we're going to be talking about an array of topics surrounding healthcare transformation and developing global cooperation in health. And I'm indeed so incredibly honored to have our speakers here on stage. Allow me to invite on stage the Vice Minister of the Ministry of State-Owned Enterprises of the Republic of Indonesia. Let us give the biggest round of applause for His Excellency, Mr. Pahala Mansuri. Your Excellency, Minister Pahala, we're so happy to have you here. And ladies and gentlemen, next, allow me to invite to the stage the Director of the India Office of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Let us give a big round of applause for Mr. Hari Menon. Hello, Mr. Hari. So happy to have you here. And ladies and gentlemen, next also allow me to invite to the stage the Senior Lead Investigator for Community Health of the University of Oxford. Let us welcome Mr. Anuraj Shankar. Let's give him a big round of applause. So much to learn from Mr. Anuraj. We're so happy to have our speakers here on stage. And of course, we'd also like to invite on stage the Senior Division Chair Education of the Mayo Clinic College of Medicine and Science. Let us give a big round of applause for Ms. Nell Robinson. Thank you very much, Ms. Robinson, for being with us here today. And distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we sure have the experts in their field to talk about healthcare, and today we're going to learn so much from them. So, ladies and gentlemen, to start, I would like to have all of our speakers, starting from Mr. Anuraj, to maybe tell us a little bit about yourself as well as the work that you do, your opening remarks.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm Anuraj Shankar, Senior Lead Investigator for Community Health with the University of Oxford. I was originally trained as a basic scientist at Harvard University, subsequently got into maternal and child health and a lot of issues related to community health. and started working very closely with a government, how to improve healthcare and so forth. And actually first came to Indonesia around 20 years ago in 2000 to do some large-scale randomized controlled trials, strengthening health systems, and never left really, continued to work here because it's such a fantastic place and a lot of exciting things happening in Indonesia in general. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Vice Minister Pahala?
Sorry, I
Oh,
didn't get the
we'd like
question.
to, yes, we'd like you to maybe deliver a little bit of self-introduction, which of course you don't need to, and maybe your opening remarks as well as the recent work that you've done.
Yeah, so thank you very much, and thank you for all of the speakers. I think one of the things from the pandemic that we have learned is actually the importance of building a much stronger healthcare ecosystem in Indonesia. Indonesia, despite the fact that we have already developed right now, for example, Bio Farma is one of the 5 major exporter of vaccine. And that is actually happening even before the pandemic. But I think at the same time, when the pandemic actually hits us, we need to rely on other countries. So I think one of the key things that we have actually learned from the pandemic is actually how Indonesia can actually develop its healthcare independence. Right now in Indonesia, for example, we are still importing about 95% of the active ingredients of the pharmaceutical products that we actually consume in Indonesia. About more than 70% of the medical equipment is also still imported from other countries. About 2 million people, or about $6.5 billion are actually spent by Indonesia outside of Indonesia because they are not getting the right level of healthcare services in Indonesia. So how are we going to be able to address that is certainly one of the key challenges, even though that this SOE that we have has already developed a much stronger pharma as well as the healthcare infrastructure in Indonesia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pahala. So the need to be more self-reliant, yet also the need to collaborate, Bapak, yeah? And Ms. Nell Robinson, your opening remarks.
Hi, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here today with you. And so I have been at the Mayo Clinic for 38 years. I hate to say that because then people realize, wow, she must be really old. But I started my career in nutrition and dietetics and then moved into medical education. So I have the privilege of leading our team at Mayo Clinic that works with education and research, working with external organizations like your own. And so we're so excited to be working with the project here in Bali to create the hospital of the future. So it's a wonderful example of collaboration and put all of these wonderful ideas to implementation that we've heard already today and much more to come. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Hari, with your opening remarks.
Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here, and congratulations again to the Ministry of SOE for this incredible conference. Just being part of the conversations this morning has been an education. And for me, in terms of background, I actually did not train to be what I'm doing right now. I started as an engineer, had a business degree, worked for 8 years in the private sector, but then moved to development 18 years ago. And I've been with the Gates Foundation through most of that period, working across health, agriculture, financial inclusion, sanitation, women's economic empowerment. And currently, I head the India office, but I also oversee our work in South and Southeast Asia, including Indonesia. So I often tell myself I have probably the most exciting portfolio of work because I see this part of the world emerging as a source of innovation for some of the development challenges that we're going to face over the next couple of decades. And I think that inversion is happening as we speak. I think COVID has actually, served as a force multiplier in many ways for some of that innovation. So I think this is a great decade for us to look forward to see how we can harness the power of innovation and problem solving that exists in countries like Indonesia, India, Bangladesh, etc., to really help solve global problems. So very excited to be here.
Thank you very much, everyone. And now my first question is from Mr. Anurag. As we've seen how we've learned from the pandemic was that we learned how the healthcare system was truly inundated. So much demand, yet a lot of countries could not fulfill the mandates, and it was really a difficult time, especially during the beginning. So my question for you is, learning from the pandemic and bracing ourselves for the future, how do we emphasize the need to collaborate more with one another? Especially, what could the stakeholders do to encourage for more collaborations between us?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think globally, what we learned from the pandemic, I would say, was very well characterized by a famous quote, which is, it's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you thought you knew for sure that's just not true. And I think this is what we learned, is that many of the institutions we thought we could depend on during the pandemic, it turned out that they were not as reliable as we thought. But on the positive side, the exciting thing that happened is, in fact, some institutions created different sorts of collaborations that really did enable amazing things to happen. And there were certain characteristics of these institutions and these collaborations. So number one, many of these institutions were much more agile, faster to respond, and they were characterized by use of information systems. And we've heard a lot about digital systems and so forth. So that was really at the core of those successful organizations and collaborations. Next was the early recognition, actually, of the magnitude of the problem. It seems counterintuitive because everyone was talking about the pandemic, but in fact, in many places, until really the end of the first year, many organizations and governments in some places were thinking this is something that would just sort of go away. So the ones that did a good job really realized early on, we got to do something, and we got to do something at scale and fast. So that realization was really important. The next thing is they focused on strong human resources. The collaborations were really involving that, saying it's not just about the technology, it's about the human resources. You know, I always say it's human beings who help other human beings. Everything else is just a tool. So that was very important. Then they defined short-term objectives for innovations, but it wasn't just any type of objective for an innovation. It was creating innovations that were foundational for additional innovations. So that was very strategic. And there was engagement across the private and the public organizations with greater transparency and relaxation of regulations for speed. So I think these were really the keys of the successful collaborations and successful organizations. And this included not just in Indonesia, but of course at the global level. And this is what really enabled synergy for diagnostics, whether it's PCR, rapid diagnostic tests, molecular sequencing, or vaccination. So these were really the important things. So I think the lesson from all that was the need to catalyze ecosystems, right? Meaning that not just focusing on one specific innovation or intervention that you're going to do, but thinking how do you build an ecosystem that supports emergence of solutions, emergence of innovations. And I think going forth on the collaborations, that's really the key.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anuraj and Mr. Pala. I would like to ask regarding, first point out how the SOEs have undoubtedly been such an instrumental force in fighting the disruptions caused by the pandemic. And especially here in Indonesia, what do you think the government should do to strengthen the SOEs' roles as well as improve the healthcare system here in Indonesia?
I think what we need to do is really building on this momentum. I think the pandemic really actually make us realize that we need to change, we need to significantly improve, and I think we don't let this momentum of us of actually being complacent again. So I think one of the things that Anuraj just mentioned just now, one of the things that we actually seen is the regulation itself. How the regulation will allow us to be able to break through this wall. Just to give you an example, within the Ministry of SOE, we are trying to actually establish a special economic zone, and we are actually working with Mayu to establish a hospital within the special economic zone to allow doctors of Indonesian diaspora to be able to practice here. Indonesia actually requires a significant amount of doctors and especially specialist doctors. And if we just take the current regulation actually as it is, and we are not trying to actually see what can actually be improved, then we will continue to have the shortage of Indonesian specialist doctors and doctors. Or if we are actually just letting this off, we are continuing to import 95% of the active ingredients, for example. We should not actually let that to actually happen. So we need to actually do something, building the momentum of this pandemic for Indonesia to really change this, whether it is actually the regulation, the healthcare services provider, the pharmaceutical company, the vaccine producer. So all of these things, we need to actually build on this momentum. The second thing is about collaboration, as mentioned by Anuraj. We cannot do the improvement in the healthcare ecosystem by ourselves, whether it is actually the SOE itself or is it actually SOE with other countries. So we need to, so let's take vaccine, for example. And we know that vaccine requires a lot of innovation and a lot of technology investing. And we've actually been working with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for quite a while. But I think we need to build that on top of that. There's a lot of other multilateral agency, institution, including what is actually the result of the G20 is the establishment of FIF, which is actually the trust fund that is actually being established among the G20 countries to allow and to invest in each of the countries to improve the healthcare infrastructure. So we need collaboration. We need the G7 countries and the developing countries within the G20, and we need to actually work with other institutions, including with Mayo, Bill and Melinda Gates, and other institutions. And I think the third is collaboration amongst the institutions. SOE, the government hospitals, the university. One of the things that I realized, one of the examples, why is it that Indonesian specialist doctors, we are still shortage? Because we don't have enough collaboration between the university and the hospital to be able to develop all of this. And this is actually something that we learned from Mayo, the importance of residents' experience for us to really be developing good quality doctor specialists in Indonesia in the future.
Thank you very much, Vice Minister Pahala. And I would like to ask Mr. Hari regarding Vice Minister Pahala as well as Mr. Anuraj has emphasized on the need to collaborate. Yet, during the beginning, the early days of the pandemic, we've seen countries take such a self-interested approach and strategies. And what are your views on this? And bracing for, hopefully not, future pandemics, do you think that we need a formal platform or multilateral institution in which countries can collaborate together and so that they could collaborate to prepare for similar challenges?
No, thank you very much. And the point you raise is very germane. I think the way the world responded, and particularly in the first 18 months of COVID, is a collective black mark for humanity. I mean, it was really the worst of nationalism, people looking out for their own interests instead of thinking of the collective good. And the problem with the pandemic is, as everyone says, you're not safe until everyone is safe. So there's already data to show that, some of the variants that came out later, like Omicron, etc., were really the factor of inequities in vaccine access. And, the world could have protected itself a lot better if, we had planned for this. I think the challenge really was that no one was prepared for this and countries started to panic. And I think we all recognize, from human behavior, when you panic, you don't make the best decisions. So I think the key is really for us to look to the future and be prepared for the next pandemic. There is going to be one, for sure. Just the nature of, human development, the way we are actually getting closer to, pathogens, pathogen pools and reservoirs, wherever they are, almost guarantee that, there will be another pandemic. We don't know when, maybe in a decade or two, or could be, sooner. But we need to learn from the lessons of, the last 3 years to harness what worked. A lot of things did work, We have, almost 10 vaccines that have been developed and rolled out in, less than 18 months, which had never been done before. you used to think in decades for vaccine development, and now you've had, in a few years, vaccines ready, approved, rolled out at very large scale. Over 3 billion people have been vaccinated again in the last 3 years. Both of these would have been unimaginable, even 5 or 10 years ago. The problem, of course, has been, the inequity and, I guess, as Anuraj mentioned, some of the institutional dysfunction that we've seen. Now, I don't know if the answer is to create a new institution, because, creating credibility for especially a multilateral platform that's totally new itself is going to be a multi-year effort. I don't know if we have the time. My sense is the answer lies in what the minister mentioned, which is to bring in new kinds of partners. So it's really all of society representation we bring to these institutions. So I think the opportunity is more for institutional reform. And I believe firmly that countries from the global south need more representation in the leadership of these institutions, because we are where a lot of the population lives that need these institutions to show up. Many of the G7 countries don't really rely on the WHO and others for public health advice, but LMICs and LICs do. And it is a bit unfortunate that we don't have the same level of representation at leadership levels in these institutions from the global south. And so I believe, the 4-year period that we have, starting with Indonesia's G20 presidency, next year is India's, the year after that is Brazil, and the year after that is South Africa. So it's going to be 4 important countries from the global south who will have the G20 presidency. So how they can think of some of this governance reform, how platforms like the fifth that have been created can help, build the capabilities for product research and development, manufacturing, and also strengthening the delivery systems, because that's the other element that gets overlooked. Many countries, particularly LIC countries, did not have the delivery systems for vaccines to get to people. So even if you had vaccine manufacturing, it might not have actually ended up saving lives. So the system strengthening aspect is equally important. And so my sense is, not necessarily new institutions, but the same institutions with more representative leadership, and focusing on funding and distributing the capabilities for R&D. So, there is a lot more of that in the global south, for manufacturing, and strengthening health systems so these products are able to get to people when we need them. Last but not least, we have to harness digital systems much more effectively. While we have to solve for the human resources challenges that many of the countries in the global south face, that may take some time, but digital systems can help us leapfrog. So again, learning from the experiences of countries like Indonesia that used digital platforms extremely effectively, India, to deliver at scale, that's another area where I think regional collaboration is critical. Thank you.
Noted. Thank you very much, Mr. Hari and Mr. Anuraj. Seeing the importance of how stakeholders need to collaborate and work with one another. What do you think are the priorities that needs to be emphasized in the next step, especially in the era of digitalization? As we've seen in the second session of the panel discussion, we've emphasized and realized how digitalization has impacted significantly in investments and in trade. What about digitalization's impact on healthcare?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I would say one of the biggest keys is creating a digital system that really reaches from the community to the hospital. So for pandemic preparedness, we need this frontline surveillance system where we're able to capture illnesses, emerging illnesses, identify what those actually are, have those go into a surveillance system, a very strong digital system, so we have earlier detection of outbreaks, unknown outbreaks, and so forth. But the key to this whole thing is a health information system of recording data for high interoperability. And this is known as the Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources, FHIR, FHIR as it's called. This is very, very critical. This enables you to have fully interoperable information, a one data system, but not a one data system in the sense that it's all hosted in one place. It's a one data system because it's adhering to the same standards. So you have a distributed system of information from the home, the community, to the hospital, across different hospitals, different communities, and so forth, so it's all fully interoperable. That's the key, really. That's the super app. It's not a super app, it's a super ecosystem of information.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Nell Robinson, I'd like to point out that Mayo Clinic has been ranked the #1 hospital in the U.S. for 7 consecutive years, so you are no stranger to excellence. And what is Mayo Clinic's future plan for global health excellence, and does it also include Mayo Health's secret recipe to be #1?
So that's a loaded question, but I'll do the best that I can. So Mayo Clinic has been around for over 150 years. So we are a values-based organization, and from the very beginning, from our founders, it was an integrated, team-based model for caring for people. I think another thing that's really important in the model, and which has helped us attain and maintain the #1 hospital, is that at the very center of every single thing we do, every decision we make, every dollar we spend, is the patient. So the whole way of care, the way we approach care, is not from what's best for the physician or what's best for the institution. It's really what's best for the patient. And when you align all of your resources and all your purposes around good, excellent patient care, then a lot of those other things happen. We can sit in committee meetings where we're making decisions, and if there's a contentious discussion about what should happen, somebody will always bring up what is best for the patient. And that is a very leveling comment that helps put priorities in order. So one thing is the way we have our values-based culture. We use the acronym RICH TIES, which means respect, integrity, compassion, healing, teamwork, which is really critical, innovation, excellence, and stewardship. And those are not just words on a page or plaques on a wall. It's really how we take care of ourselves and each other. And so foundational to being able to provide excellent care is being strong, healthy organizations. So we are thrilled to be in collaboration with the Indonesian Health Corporation and hope that we can bring some of our 150 years of experience in excellence in medicine to this country and this culture to be able to help maybe impart some of our lessons learned, some of the ways we take care of patients. Another important thing, and Anurag mentioned it, and I think the minister mentioned it as well, Mayo Clinic is, we call it a 3-shield organization. So patient care is at the center of what we do, but we're also heavily invested in education because we feel like and this goes back to our founders 150 plus years ago, unless you're educating the providers of the future, you're not going to be able to keep up. And it's more true now than it ever has been. Also, the third shield in the Mayo model is research. So taking really great care of patients means you have to educate the future workforce, but you also have to be doing research. You have to be doing basic science, clinical research to understand what are the health challenges. How do you sequence the genome? How do you figure out, precision medicine? What are the best ways to care for patients? And then make that available globally. Our founder, William Worrell Mayo, back in the late 1800s, had a mission to go out all over the world and experience healthcare in different places, and then invite physicians and others into the Mayo Clinic to learn and to take the best of both. And so we haven't, up until the last few years, we really have been more internally focused on education and excellence and care within Mayo Clinic. And now we've pivoted to be able to really take what we've learned and share and collaborate externally. So looking forward to a wonderful, bright future with this organization, and happy to share what we've learned.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nell Robinson, on emphasizing the need for a better medical and research institutions, as well as I would like to ask Mr. Pahala regarding responding to global challenges ahead, as well as to achieve Indonesia's 2045 vision for health sovereignty. I would like to ask you how, first emphasize how the SOEs in the healthcare and pharmaceutical industries are indeed very important to achieve this. And how do you think digitalization would achieve or would affect the Indonesian SOEs and produce strategic solutions for a better healthcare system here in Indonesia?
Well, as was mentioned just now by Anurag and also Nell, it's digitalization and technology, and to combine it, it's about how are we going to be able to put the patient-centered approach when we are actually doing the digitalization. And I think one of the key things that we got from the pandemic in Indonesia is actually the breakthrough that we have in Peduli Lindungi. Peduli Lindungi is very difficult to pronounce for non-Indonesian, but it is actually one of the most powerful things because it almost integrates the data of the patient, and we should actually be able to use it to improve the quality of service that we have, and if, in terms of the healthcare delivery to our customers. Let's say, for example, right now, a customer may actually have to be tested multiple times whenever they go to different healthcare providers. Whereas if we are going to be able to integrate the data among the healthcare providers, the clinic, the pharmaceutical company, it will not only improve the quality of the patient's experience, but it will also lessen the cost of the healthcare. Healthcare is actually very expensive, not only for the patient, but also for the government. Because in Indonesia, we have a universal healthcare system. And by improving that, by avoiding to be able to and having to multiply testing the patients several times, we will also be able to actually reduce. So that is actually an example of how we should think about, and we really need to actually think about the quick wins. What are the easy user case that we need to actually implement by integrating, and we can actually do it because the SOE has the complete ecosystem, the pharma, the distributor, the hospitals, the clinics, the testing or the diagnostic centers, the vaccine company. We all have this under the umbrella, and we can actually share and be able to actually improve the data and the experience for the patient just by integrating the data.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pahala. What a great anchor message. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as we wrap up this session on healthcare, I'd like to point out how not long after, in 2050, we'll have 9 billion people in population. So you can imagine 9 billion people in need to be fed, clothed, transport, educate, and employ. So bracing ourselves for the next pandemic, you can imagine the larger scope that we're going to have to face and how difficult things will be. And if there's one thing and one theme that we all need to learn is that the importance for all of us to have humility. Truly, there's never been a time in the world where the need to continually learn has never been clearer, that we can continue to adapt in today's crisis as well as prepare for the next. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd truly like to thank our dearest speakers here today. As they say, a dream that we dream alone is merely a dream, but a mission and a dream that we dream together becomes a reality. And I'd like to thank our speakers for pointing that out, and let us give them the biggest round of applause. Thank you so much. And I'd like to deliver the stage back to our MC.
Thank you very much, speakers and moderator. We would like to invite you to stand up for the presentation of Token of Appreciation. We would like to invite Mr. Pahala Mansurit to present the token of appreciations to the speakers for this last panel discussion. Now we would like to invite everyone to pose for a photo session. Thank you very much, speakers and moderator, for the final panel discussions of the day. You may return to your seats.